Oh, hi, I'm Ginger Lane, and I'm an independent dancer and choreographer. And I have lived in Chicago for, since 1946. So a long, long time. And I began dancing in about 1950. And dance has been my life. But it wasn't until about probably 1995, that I became involved with disability dance. And so it's been an interesting and wonderful life since then, and continues to be.
Ginger, who did you study dance with here in Chicago?
I studied dance with Edna McRae, who was the dean of Chicago dance, a wonderful teacher, and my mentor, and sort of nobody compared to her. And other places that I had studied just didn't hold a candle to her technique and her discipline and her ability to convey what dance was all about. So she and I danced with her in her company and learned all types of dance, which was just wonderful. So it wasn't confined to classical ballet. And she also knew everybody. She knew Balanchine, she knew Anton Dolan, she knew Bob Joffrey. Bob Joffrey would come and teach class when he was in town. And so it was a wonderful education. She was very strict, so not everybody loved her. But if she liked you and saw potential, you were in, you were made.
Can you talk about performing with the company, your career as a dancer before your life shifted?
What was wonderful about working with Miss McRae was not only did we do things like Sleeping Beauty and Swan Lake, and I got to perform Sugar Plum Fairy a number of times. We also did Spanish, so lots of character and tap and can-cans and country fair types of work. So it was a wonderful variety and mix, which kind of set you up for whatever you wanted to do. And jazz came along later for me, but it wasn't the main focus. You know, I later then studied with Gus Giordano, which was a lark and great. But working, we had a line, and it was the McRae Dancers line, and the older you got, the more senior you got, and it was great. So even as a teenager, because we got paid, we were professionals, and treated as professionals, and we traveled all over the Midwest, and I loved it. But then I went off to college, and what was interesting about Miss McRae, not interesting, but as she encouraged me to continue my education and go to college and not make a beeline for New York. And that started me on a different path, which was great. She said, you can do both. So that's what I chose to do.
Which is all so unique for the time.
Yeah.
Those are things we're still working on.
Exactly. Yeah, and because not everybody, and I was tall, had a lean body, but maybe she saw that I wasn't, that I had other interests as well. Mm-hmm. Because as a teenager, I was also a basketball player in school.
I didn't know that.
And yeah, and while the line was and the dance line was my main interest, I did have these other interests. And maybe she saw something in that and encouraged me to, to expand myself beyond dance, which was great.
I remember you telling me about a dance studio that you had.
Her studio?
Your studio.
Her studio was in the Fine Arts Building, and it's one of the earliest and last buildings that has grill elevators and an elevator operator. And he knew all of our names, and we knew his, and there was of course, studio where we had to wash down the floors, and you had to work besides just taking dance class and rehearsals. You had to kind of earn your pay, and work at the desk, and also work in the rehearsal. There was another studio that we called Sight Hall, which was a rehearsal space, and learn about costuming, and it was just the Fine Arts Building was a wonderful building because it was filled with artists of all kinds. And one of the key things about Edna McRae was that she insisted that you study music.
Ooh.
So music was because music is a part of dance. You can't really be a dancer unless you have a grounding and understanding of different musical styles and composers, and that was great. And some of the people that I got to meet and dance with were Patty Klekovic, who's a big Chicago and dancer, and Orrin Kahan, and I mean, I was there at a time that was ripe for exploring dance and having a wonderful coterie of other dancers.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Moving on, your choreographic career, as far as I know, began in the disability dance world.
Right. I had done a little bit of choreography before that, but minimal. Mm-hmm. Because in my mind at that time, I loved to perform. So I was a dancer. I wasn't a choreographer. And I had gone to Interlochen Center for the Arts for a number of years. And performance was what it was all about. But I'd studied ballet and modern there. And I choreographed a little bit, but it kind of wasn't my thing, because I guess I love being on stage and performing for an audience. But then once I became disabled, my focus shifted a bit, because now there were many things I could no longer do as a classical dancer, and I had to sort of refocus my thinking and what the possibilities were. And one of those things was to create dance and create work that was going to work on my body and on other people who also had disabilities, because that I knew intimately, how to work with other disabled people.
One of my favorite stories about you is that you got arrested, which ties, I think, into the Dancing with Disability movement, because it's a movement. It's part of fighting for civil rights for people with disabilities, which you did in DC.
Right. 1990, we were demonstrating for the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this was it was just an incredible experience. I had been a member of ADAPT, which was a disability rights organization, and I had been an employee of Access Living, the big independent living center in Chicago. And we went to DC to stand in the rotunda of the Capitol and demand that they pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. And 104 of us got arrested What was cool about getting arrested was that they put us all in what, because we wouldn't stop chanting. And so the police came and surrounded us and said, "You're not allowed to chant in the rotunda of the Capitol." And we said, "Oh, we're just exercising our civil rights. Sorry about that." And we continued and locked our wheelchairs, and they arrested us. Took us down to, I don't remember exactly where, but locked us in a big room and said 104 of us, and gave us all numbers. And you have to stay in that position. Do not move. Well, within 30 seconds, we were all just messed everything up, and they didn't know what to do with us. And then they said they had to send out for food. And I'm Jewish, and I don't keep kosher or anything, but I demanded kosher food, which I don't even like. So they had to find a delicatessen that was going to cater to my needs, as well as get everybody else food. So you just made it as difficult as you could on them. Then finally they released us, but they said you have to show up the next morning in front of the judge, so come to the courthouse. So we did, except there was one problem. The courthouse, to get to the courtroom, was up a huge flight of stairs, and none of us could go up those stairs, and there was no elevator.
Because the ADA hadn't been passed.
The ADA had not been passed. This was in March of 1990. We did our thing, and of course, July 26, 1990, President Bush, George H.W. Bush, passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we were all thrilled. And now this year is what, 35th anniversary?
35th.
And there have been some setbacks, but there's also been a lot of accommodations have been made, and I think the fight continues.
Especially in the arts, where budgets and old spaces get in the way of the best of intentions, where your career in this field of dance with disability.
Trying to get into the Athenaeum Theater, for example, in Chicago, and then some venues when we, excuse me, would perform in St. Louis. Trying to get into those theaters was really difficult. And so we had to fight for not only access to the audience space, but access on stage, and finding a way to enter the buildings, especially if you used a chair and there was no way in, was quite difficult. So fighting for that type of access, and then fighting for a seat at the table so that we could become part of the decision makers was critical.
How did that all begin? Where did it start?
I think it started, LaDonna, with our demanding our rights, with our simply saying, this cannot stand. We are not token dancers and performers. We need to be paid a professional wage. We need to be part of the decision-making process. I can't give you a date, or I can't give you a specific example. Maybe you have one.
Well, how did you start dancing again? Where was there an opportunity for you to take a class or?
Okay, interestingly enough, because I was working at Access Living and also working at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, now known as the Shirley Ryan Ability Center. I was working on women's issues. I met Alana Hodges at that time, and we had I don't recall, a women's something, or a get-together of sorts. And she and I started talking, and we both said that we liked to dance. And she said, well, you know, I know Homer Bryant. Why don't we take class with him? So my career as a disability dancer began because of Alana, which was wonderful. And then she had this company, DanceDetour. And so I owe whatever I've done in the disability dance world really to her, because she started it. And then that was about 1995, I think, 96. And then we had the opportunity, because Bob Joffrey, actually Jerry Arpino, the other co-founder of the Joffrey Ballet, was moving the company to Chicago. And an opportunity arose for us to collaborate with the Joffrey Ballet and create a piece that we would perform as a benefit for Access Living. And we performed that at Navy Pier. So it was both a Joffrey Ballet and DanceDetour. And I was a member of DanceDetour for 10 years. And that was a wonderful opportunity to rehearse the piece, which was choreographed by Davis Robertson, one of Joffrey's leading dancers and choreographers at that time. It was terrific. And what was I going to say? And then we had an interview at Studs Terkel. So Jerry Arpino and I started talking, and I said, well, Mr. A, I call him Mr. Arpino, you know, I danced with Diane Consor. Diane Consor had been at Edna McRae's studio, and she had joined Bob Joffrey out on the West Coast. And so we had this wonderful conversation. I mean, I'd never met Jerry Arpino before, and suddenly there we are chatting away like old friends in front of Studs Terkel. So it was a great, great interview. And then we had the opportunity to perform the piece called Hitch. It was to music from Alfred Hitchcock. It was a great piece. There were 5 of us performers, 2 Joffrey dancers and 3 of us, Alana, Normez, and I, who all 3 of us used chairs. And it was a fun piece to do. And then we performed it at Ravinia as well. And out of that kind of grew the Joffrey Ballet having a disabled child as part of the Nutcracker for a number of years. So, you know how things grow like Topsy?
Yeah.
It just took off, and
that would have been the first time
What?
dancers. That
Yeah.
would have been the first time dancers in wheelchairs had been on any of those stages.
that's right. And then Scott Silberstein of HMS Video interviewed us and did a whole program called Dance from the Heart, which was an award-winning film on WTTW and PBS. And it was, so it's still out there. It's shown occasionally. And then there was this whole series, you know, of Dance in America. And so it was part of that. And just recently, Scott wrote, I think was interviewed. He either was interviewed or he wrote an article about some memorable times. He mentioned River North. He mentioned, I can't remember. And he mentioned Dance from the Heart.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I wrote him a note, and I mean, he was great. I had also done some work for him on other things. So that was a great opportunity. And that sort of started at least the disability dance movement in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So it was physically integrated dance. And went out to Axis Dance Company in California, took a 1-week intensive workshop with them, and learned more about disability rights and dance. And, the United States was pretty slow in coming to integrated dance, whereas Europe was light years ahead in both, not in accommodations, but in wanting to include people with disabilities in dance. And not just physically integrated dance, but intellectual disabilities and sensory disabilities. And so we learned from them.
By physically integrated dance, that means people in wheelchairs and with mobility impairments?
Well, physically integrated at the time, and there's been some, just the way disability itself, the terminology around disability has evolved. Actually, terminology about language evolves over time. So, handicap is no longer a term that is employed by people with disabilities. And at the time that Axis Dance Company formed, they only had people with physical disabilities. Mm-hmm. They didn't have anybody with visual impairment or hearing disabilities as part of their company. But it was integrating dancers with disabilities along with dancers without disabilities. It has evolved to some degree to what we now I would call it the term of today, which is sort of like the zeitgeist of today, disability dance. Because disability dance encompasses things like disability culture, politics, history, and disability aesthetics. And it's a little, and there's also another term that is often used, inclusive dance. Inclusive dance, to me, it's not a term that I use too much, except with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, mm-hmm. which is great as a descriptor, but it doesn't include people with physical disabilities as much. So that's why I like the idea of disability, because it's an all-encompassing term.
Can you talk about disability aesthetics?
Disability aesthetics acknowledges the innate authenticity of the disability experience and derives from not limiting art to the Greek concept of perfection, mm-hmm. which, by the way, of course, classical ballet adheres to, mm-hmm. which is very different from disability dance, which has a closer association, actually, with modern dance.
Yes, it's more contemporary.
It's more contemporary. It's also more, ballet has this aesthetic of lightness and up. Everything is lifted up, whereas modern dance and disability dance is a more grounded kind of aesthetic. and focuses more, I think, on an understanding of the individual and the beauty that you find within the individual, not as a Greek ideal of perfection. Because actually, when you think about it, the Venus de Milo is what? She's a woman with no arms, right? So she's disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the seeking perfection, which means without flaw, is what I like about disability dance is that there's perfection in imperfection. You don't need that flawless ideal to find beauty, to create anything that's worthwhile. And that's part of disability aesthetics.
And you created a dance titled Imperfect.
Yes, I did.
Your career as it's evolved. As your career has evolved, and you've moved into more and more choreographic work and won some awards for your choreography. How has that, what inspires you to create?
Actually, the first inspiration for me usually comes from music. And while I'm not a musician, I'm a very musical person. And if I find there's a piece that speaks to me, I say, how can you move to this? What can we do? How can I? Dance is a form of expression. And so I want to perhaps express what that music is saying. And as a choreographer, I want to use the experience and the knowledge I have to explore with other dancers what we can achieve together.
Which is the most fun part.
Yeah.
We play around, right, with climbing and tilting and maybe hurting ourselves a little bit, but that's mostly me.
It is, but it also, the way I would choreograph a piece for you is very different from the way I would choreograph a piece for me. Mm-hmm. Because your movement is very different and your ability is very different from mine.
Right, and not just the way that two dancers are always different, but we also have different chairs and different levels of ability, and even two manual chairs can be so different. And I love how you incorporate all of that.
Uh-huh. And that's, you learn by doing. Mm-hmm. Not only do you learn by doing, but you also learn by listening and watching. And so I really like the idea of collaboration with the dancers with whom I'm working. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I'm coming from a top-down position as a choreographer. I may have the final word, but and I work more organically. So I'm watching dancers and see what their movement style is, what suits them, what they move to naturally, and then try to create movement that's going to elicit an emotion from them with their input and often using steps that they create by maybe giving them a word or an idea to think about. And it's a fun process. It can be frustrating at times, but it's so enjoyable. And of course, you learn so much by going to see other dance companies and really watching them carefully and closely and talking with your community of dancers.
Which
I
is
learned
very similar to how a person without a disability would choreograph, because it's dance.
Yeah, it's dance, but it's also grounded so much in the lived experience of people with disabilities.
How has your disability affected your opportunities in dance?
The opportunities that I've had have, I guess in some ways I'm sort of a reactive person, so opportunities come to me rather than my going out and seeking them. For example, I first got involved with MOMENTA Dance Company back in 2002 because I had met this guy and bought a wheelchair through him. And he delivered it to my daughter's house, my son's house. And we were chatting, and he had a daughter who was studying dance. And I said, oh, well, I can help you with that. Where is she studying? And because he was sort of asking advice. And I said, well, I can tell you if that's a good studio or not a good studio, you know, which. So we started chatting. The next thing I know is I got a phone call from this guy out in Oak Park. His name was Larry Ipple, and he said, I heard about you from this guy, Chris Lenzo. He says you're a dancer, and I'm choreographing a piece because Chris got our building to become wheelchair accessible. We put in a lift to the second floor, and I got commissioned to create a piece, and I'd like you to be in it. Do you want to be in it? And I sort of said, huh? I said, yes. So he came to me. I didn't reach out to him because I didn't know about him. Mm-hmm. And Chris and I were both in that piece, along with Chris's daughter.
And Chris's daughter uses a wheelchair as well?
Yes. Chris's daughter uses a wheelchair as well. And so it was sort of it was almost as though Chris and I were mother and father, and we had our children could do it. So that was great. And through Larry, of course, I met Stephanie Clemens and Mike Dutka, her partner, and Stephanie and I became friends, and then she asked me to choreograph a piece for their upcoming fall show performance, which I did. And in fact, I asked Alana if she would be in that piece, along with Chris and several other dancers, which she did. And again, like Topsy, it grew, because then I started choreographing more and more pieces for MOMENTA. So both spring and fall, we would have a wonderful time creating works. And that was started back in 2002. Oh yeah, I was part of a disability arts consortium that we had started. I forgot a lot. There's so much history. We had started a disability arts consortium, which was great. And then Access Living, yes, in 2000. So our offices were, and I wasn't working so much on dance, I was working on disability rights and activism. So I was very strong, and doing peer counseling. Ran support groups of people with disabilities, particularly those with spinal cord injuries. And we moved our offices in 2008.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was 2008. And that year, I said, well, I want to choreograph a piece. And there was going to be on the fourth floor, a big open space for gatherings and meetings and things. And I said, put it a dance floor, which they didn't, but I hired a dance floor, and sort of, it was a little bit, the first one, we called it Off Balance, and it was a little bit like Mickey and Judy getting together. Let's put on a show, because I had to run out to God knows where to get black drape and pipe and create a stage out of just a big conference room.
Well, for that first one, all we had were the fluorescent lighting on the ceiling.
And I ran to Home Depot to get blackout shades for the windows. It was unbelievable. But we did it. And I asked Alana if she would do a piece with DanceDetour, and you were part of that. And that was a lot of fun. So that was the start. And then every year since then, we changed the name from Off Balance. And the reason I chose Off Balance was just because it was this, little tilt, which I thought was very clever. But anyway, we then changed the title to Counterbalance. And the next year, and Stephanie and I were co-artistic directors. Mm-hmm. And that continued up until 2020.
Well, and it continues now after your retirement.
Right, but Stephanie and I were really co-artistic directors. Mike did all the sound and lighting, which was fantastic. We had Anita Fillmore Kenney, who was one of my favorite dancers, and actually the first piece that I choreographed for Counterbalance was a duet for Anita and me. That was an interesting piece because it combined the concept of ballet, my pre-disability self as represented by Anita, and me as my post-disability self. So it was a blending of the two different types. Anita does not use a chair, and she does not have a disability. She does not have an apparent disability.
Yes.
So she was part of sort of the process of, creating Counterbalance. And we did that every year.
It was a beautiful piece. And one thing, when you say the ballet was represented, the lines of ballet were represented, but from the audience perspective, it didn't look like trying to do ballet, but not doing it right. It was an embodiment of the essence.
Well, my personal dance aesthetic mm-hmm. is very lyrical. So I love line, mm-hmm. and that comes out of, I think, my training with Edna McRae on creating that long, lean line and sort of an ethereal quality. Everything was lifted and up, not like Martha Graham and Doris Humphrey, who are down and more earthbound, which is a wonderful aesthetic, but it wasn't what I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And so, and I like things that flow. So a lyrical line or a lyrical aesthetic tends to that. And in creating this piece that we're both talking about, prayer, Anita sort of was a specter or shadow of my pre-disability self that was like a hovering angel. And she had the line, but so did I, except I was seated and she was not. And that piece was often cited and used in some articles, so images of that. And I think, so that was sort of, I would say, that began sort of a through line in terms of, it was like a coming together of, pre and post disability self of me. And another piece then, which you mentioned earlier, imperfect, was based on a poem that I had come across that I loved, called "The Imperfect is Our Paradise" by the poet Wallace Stevens, who is just a remarkable was a remarkable American poet and writer. And the concept being, you don't need to be perfect to be perfect, right? And so that was a duet that I created for Susan Myers and me, and Susan as a non-disabled person, and I as the person with the dancer with a disability. I choreographed it so that we were in very close proximity throughout the entire piece, and almost a challenge to the audience, saying to them what's perfect and what's not perfect, to get them to think. And then that moved into creating the next piece that you were in, that I asked you to be part of, that really carried that line that started with prayer about growth. Maybe growth is the word, because it started that line of developing a greater disability dance aesthetic and growth through the generations, because I created that with four different generations in mind.
And that was called Flow.
Flow, yes. So again, the term flow, you can think of it as a ribbon, you can think of it as a line that has that same lyrical quality. And you and I got to dance in that piece, which was fun.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great, and we did that at Millennium Park. So opportunities kept coming along, and I've really, I've enjoyed everything that I've worked on, and then one day I got an email or a phone call from the city of Chicago, and they wanted to honor me as for Women's History Month in Chicago as one of Chicago women movers and shakers. And I said, oh, really? Cool, okay, I'll take it. And then the next year, was it the next year or 2 years later, was honored by See Chicago Dance to accept an award.
Leadership in dance.
What?
Was it leadership? Legacy?
No, it was that?
No.
I think it was leadership.
Yes. Distinguished service.
That's it, distinguished
service.
Thank you so much. Distinguished Service Award. And there was one, oh yes, and I also won a 3 Arts Award previous to all those other awards. And those were wonderful acknowledgments. I mean, I remember even in accepting that award, I was asked to make the remarks on behalf of the 10 awardees. for the 3 Arts Award. And I think we each of us work in our own little field, doing what we love. The fact that we're being acknowledged is a plus. It's not why we're doing what we do, but it's wonderful to have that kind of recognition. So it, especially as I've gotten older and wanted to do more collaborative types of work and perform less. Well, I love performing, but there comes a time, as we say in ballet, time to hang them up, right? Put those point and ballet shoes to the side, and move on to other things. The body gives out, but this, I guess, the mind and the spirit do not. So it's been a very rewarding career for me, and now you and I get to sit and chat about dance in all its forms.
And dream and scheme of where we will go from here.
Well, I've done a little bit of writing, and I'm not a natural writer. I think I'm much more a natural performer.
You're a pretty good writer.
So I come to LaDonna, help me edit this. I'm so bad. And also I was asked to join the board of Reinventability, which is your wonderful organization, and that's been a delight and a thrill and an honor, and to serve, to give back to the community, which I think is so important. And as, not just as a choreographer, but I think part of my desire and raison d'etre is to become, is to further disability dance cultural knowledge, and to be a mentor to the next generation. So it's very, very important that whatever knowledge I do have, I can pass on to emerging dancers, because without that kind of encouragement, they won't go far. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs encouragement, right? And that's what I try to give them. And so I like to teach, but I never wanted to run a company, never wanted to have a studio, and I never wanted to do full-time teaching. But teaching is critical. I mean, that's how I learned and how everybody learns. And it's also an opportunity to be part of the community and an opportunity to give back. Yeah. And to do this interview for the Chicago Dance History Project is wonderful, because it's important that we have an archive to know. One of my dearest friends is actually, I've known her since, she's a couple of years older than I, so maybe I was 13 and she was 15, and met her at Edna McRae's studio. It was Barbara Atkins Ruman. Wonderful dancer. So she and I love getting together, and then we really enjoy going to the Joffrey together, because we can say, oh my God, that's from this piece, that's from this piece. And it's a joy. And she, of course, has taught in Chicago for many years, and is a dear, dear friend, and I know has been interviewed for the Chicago Dance History Project, which is great. And she danced with all of my brain. She didn't dance with Balanchine, she danced with ballet theater?
Ballet Chicago?
No, New York.
Oh, New York.
No, she went
ABT?
to New York.
American Ballet
AB
Theater?
She went to New York when she was 16.
Oh.
Oh yeah, Edna sent her to me, said, I've taught you everything I know. I want you to go to New York. And she met with Lucia Chase,
Mm-hmm.
who invited her to join the company. So American Ballet Theater.
Yeah.
And,
Very cool.
and she toured, she toured in Europe, and unfortunately was struck by a cab crossing the street, so had an accident, and that changed the arc of her career, but she taught for many years and went on for other degrees and taught at Barra College and other places. So it's been
an adventure.
Yeah, it's been an adventure.
You know, as an outsider,
It's an adventure in life. What?
As an outsider, I would say it wasn't. Yes, those opportunities came to you, but what I see is you out there. They happen because you're there, because you're doing, because you are resilient, and
You're not resilient, you're going to die.
indeed.
So, but you also, yes, I have been. I guess what I'm saying is, I do my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I like to be recognized. I like being patted on the back, doesn't everyone?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not seeking attention. Except that that's sort of a conundrum, because as a performer, you're out there on display. But I'm out there on display as through my body, through my dance. That's how I express myself. But part of it is education, because the arts, they enrich our soul. Without the arts, where would we be? And I've gotten to know some wonderful people. You. Back in the day, I was in the first performance when George Balanchine decided to do a Nutcracker here in Chicago. I was part of that cast at the Opera House. And that was unless you allow yourself the opportunity to be out there, you're not going to be able to get those chances.
Yeah.
So that was great.
There's one thing we didn't talk about.
What?
And I don't know if you want to. The piece you did about the Holocaust, your childhood.
So, I'm originally from Germany. I was born at the beginning of World War II in Berlin. And in 2016, a wonderful choreographer and friend and colleague, Alice Shepard, had heard about my background. From an artist, Riva Lair, who actually had the desk next to me at Access Living, and told her about me. And so Alice asked if she would like to choreograph a piece that had to do with remembrance, and she sort of based it on my story, would I allow that? So we did some exploratory work on movement, and she did, and that was a great piece. I had invited Alice to perform for Counterbalance for several years, and one year included dancer Lisa Bufano from the West Coast.
And these are all people with disabilities?
What?
These are all...
Lisa, yeah, this was for Counterbalance. So everybody that I invited to be guest artists had disabilities and had either had dance companies or were involved as independent artists in dance. And Alice had spent time with Axis Dance Company, and I really admired her work. And so I invited her to perform for Counterbalance, which she did, and she choreographed her own work, and then, set this piece on us, and that used me and my story as background. It wasn't specifically about me, but it used parts of my story to create a work, and that was a wonderful piece. We did that a number of times, Chicago and St. Louis, where we were invited to perform. So that was great.
And Alice Shepard went on to be a leader in our field.
She is a leader. She also is she had a professor of medieval history, right? And then went on to dance because she happened to run into this guy, Homer Avila, who challenged her to take a dance class.
In her wheelchair.
In her chair. And she kind of said, okay, sounds interesting. And Homer was a wonderful dancer who had lost a leg and has since passed away. But so Alice really developed a wonderful career in dance. And she's done a lot of writing and gotten, Ford Foundation grants and really become a leader in disability dance. And she and Laurel Lawson have formed this, it was really a company called Kinetic Light, along with Michael Mogg, and they've just done incredible work.
And Alice has shared with me that she credits her beginning to you.
To me, of course.
To here, to Chicago.
Well, I brought her to MOMENTA, and she and Stephanie got along beautifully. But that's very nice of Alice. I mean, Alice is a wonderful choreographer and dancer on her own. She doesn't need me, but it's very generous of her.
Well, then we all need a start.
What?
We all need a start.
Well,
someone who puts our work on the stage.
Yeah, it's not just a start, but I think, acknowledging the people you work with is generous. And it's a stand-up thing to do, which is very nice. And you've had opportunities where you've included me, which has been great. I mean, performing at Millennium Park, and just being part of, continuing to be part of the Chicago dance scene is critically important. And I also think it's good not to leave others behind. Right? So that's been very worthwhile. One of the pieces that I choreographed that you were in, Flow, I wanted to have my then 20-year-old granddaughter in the piece. And her name is Taylor Lane. And it was her first professional dance performance. And since then, she has gone on to star as Velma Kelly in the national tour of the show Chicago. And she's now in New York, and she did that for a couple of years, and she's in New York and making quite a name for herself.
Jesus, stop.
And yeah, and she's gorgeous and a beautiful dancer, very different from her grandmother, because she's a Broadway dancer.
Right.
And she's a Broadway kid, which is very different from where I came from. I when I studied jazz, it was back in the mid-50s, a long time ago. So it's been good. I came out of dance that Peter Gennaro did, not people like Bob Fosse. Very different.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Bennett. Oh, and Taylor was in a chorus line.
Mm-hmm.
She had a dance and a speaking role, which was cool. She's carried on the dance, the love of dance.
The love of dance, but also things that you've taught us all of us who consider you're a mentor. The resilience, the work ethic, and the honoring those who helped you. I see all of that in you.
Yeah. But we have, when you say that Alice gave me credit for getting her started, not in dance, but in the Chicago scene, I really have to credit Alana.
Mm-hmm.
Because without, and I would say that before allowing myself to say, okay, I'll take class with Homer, and Homer was great. We loved him. I kind of was, that's dance?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure that dance would work with somebody like me who was, using a wheelchair. At the time, a manual wheelchair, not a power chair. And so, I was open enough to say to Alana, yes, I'll do it. But she's the one who said, do you want to do this? And then she had her own company and asked me to join it, which I did for 10 years. And for the last couple of years, I had started doing work with Stephanie at MOMENTA. But that's what was... So we all have somebody, don't we?
Oh, yes.
That either gave us a leg up or opened a door, mm-hmm. or made us aware. Maybe didn't even have to open a door, but made us aware.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of Homer, we're doing a hip lay collaboration, 2 dancers in wheelchairs, 2 stand-up dancers. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, cool.
Homer continues to be involved.
And of course, Alana credits Ben Vereen.
Yes.
For kind of getting her started. So we all, and then she did something with Mikhail Baryshnikov. So we all have somebody that we, not climbing on the shoulders of, but that opened a pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, Homer definitely continues to be involved.
Yes.
super guy. It's fun. It's a great world. My, I would say that for a number of years, I wasn't involved in dance at all because I was focusing on this sort of new persona that I had of disability. So I went into a more both peer mentoring concept and working with people with disabilities besides myself, and disability rights, really fighting for rights for people with disabilities, and fighting to get curb cuts built in Chicago, and fighting to get streets that weren't tilted like that you could roll down a sidewalk, and getting parking spaces for vehicles that people with disabilities used, and getting access to airplanes because the Air Carriers Act was not open to those of us with disabilities. So I was working on and housing was a critical factor. Housing and healthcare.
When housing, I don't think people even realize. I worked with families, their kid has a severe disability, and there are not accessible places to live. Pre-ADA, we have more now, but not enough. And so there were families that I worked with, they had to give their kid up to the state.
Not only that, but if they allowed you to live in the building, you had to go in through the garbage entrance. Okay?
Yeah.
And I just realized that door has been open the entire time. Oh, God. But there was such rampant discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a lot of events where getting into the hotel and getting up to the ballroom, for example, the Drake Hotel, was going up 3 different elevators that were all service elevators. Going into a restaurant, I had to go through the kitchen to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Even Cafe Brower, I just went to a cousin's wedding at Cafe Brower. To get up to the 2nd floor, I take the elevator, no problem taking the elevator, and open the elevator doors and you're in the kitchen. And I kind of say, oh, okay, I'll eat right here.
And that's the
but
good ones. At least you can get in. Like at
That's unbelievable discrimination.
Yeah.
And oppression. So what I was saying earlier was that my path for 31 years, because that's how long I was at Access Living, as a disability rights advocate and a worker, was to get recognition for and establish the rights for people with disabilities to be counted as equal citizens, and to work on healthcare issues and equal employment opportunities. So my focus wasn't so much on dance for a number of years.
And then you became the head of arts and culture.
Arts and culture at Access Living.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to credit Jim Charlton at Access Living for saying to me, well, you're doing a great job as, peer counseling coordinator, but I really would like you to head up arts and culture, because that was a project that he had started along with Carrie Sandel at U of C. I mean,
UIC.
U of I, UIC. University of Illinois, Chicago. And I said, oh, cool, okay. So again, I didn't say, oh, I need this. I'm going to fight for it. It came because he said, how about doing this? I said, okay. So I was open to agreeing to do things.
And you were there.
And I was there.
Working hard and doing
well, and I was there at the right time.
Yes.
So, I think a lot of it is credit goes to just being in the right place at the right time.
Well, I think, as all movements evolve, the arts and culture aspect, kind of entering the scene when it did and how it's growing, because there are still locked doors at the end of the ramps, but we're at a point where we have the law in place, and now we change hearts and minds, and that's how I see what we do with dance.
Well, I think also what I see, the difference between when I became disabled, 1984, and today, is people with disabilities are out in the world in all forms, whether they're dancers or musicians or going to the park and the beach and doing their thing, whatever they choose to do. It didn't used to be that way. We're no longer hidden away and we're not institutionalized. But that's a big struggle, and it was a struggle on the part of people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And fighting for dance access was done on the part of dancers with disabilities. It was not given to us by the mainstream dance community. That's an important distinction, I think, that needs to be acknowledged in disability dance history, that we've had to fight for those rights. We've had to fight for a place at the table. We've had to fight to get grants. We still have to fight, right? Mm-hmm. Big foundations are not eagerly coming to us and saying, oh, here, we want to give you a pot, a pot full of money to create work. We go to them and they kind of just say, legitimize yourself, defend yourselves.
Yes.
Why are you deserving?
Well, everyone is competing for grant money. Well, I, for example, I was on a panel recently, and one of the other judges said, when we came to an artist with a disability, oh, I really hate judging these because, I'm supposed to feel bad for them and the quality just is, I don't want to, but this is actually okay. Like, I expected a disabled artist to be sub and maybe we feel bad for them and give them a grant. But this one, the videos aren't bad. And I thought, oh my God.
Yeah. And it's very difficult to change hearts and minds. In fact, it's almost impossible. Which is why we have to fight for rights. It's a question of equal rights. It's not a question of pity or sympathy or even compassion. This is our right. This is what we demand. Yes, I think, but there's something about human nature that you look at somebody who has a disability and you kind of say, therefore, but for the grace of God, go I. Makes me unhappy and want to kind of throw up. Can edit that out. But it is something, maybe just about the human condition, that if you see something that is different from you, you think lesser of that situation or that person. And sometimes you just feel genuinely sorry because you think, that's so sad. Which is, it's too bad. But there better come a time when there's an acknowledgement that disability has existed forever, right? Forever and ever and ever. Different times demand different things. In prehistoric times, people were shunned. In slightly more forward times, people were idealized, but therefore they were sacrificed because we were so special. And then we were institutionalized because we needed to be taken care of, but we couldn't make decisions on our own. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't earn a living on our own. So, throughout history, there have been different attitudes. And that pertains to the arts as well, right? Think about someone like Van Gogh. Where would art today be without him? Where would, back to the concept of perfection and imperfection. Think about the art of Braque and Picasso. All these disjointed images that are not that perfect image.
They're imperfect.
Yeah, there's a beauty to be found in that, which is critically important. Whom did we forget to mention that's so important? Well, there are so many people, but I'm specifically thinking about Frank Shaves in Chicago, right? And thinking about, actually, another opportunity that came up, which was so great, was Ballet Chicago.
Yes.
Is a school and a company here in Chicago that is on the Balanchine method, started and founded by Daniel Duell, who had been a Balanchine dancer, and his wife Patricia. And he called me one day and said, Stephanie Clemens said I should really call you because I'm choreographing The Secret Garden and you would be an ideal advisor on the disability aspect. So I went down and met with him and really have developed a lovely friendship with him that is now expanded his Nutcracker to being an inclusive performance in December that includes people with disabilities. Those are great opportunities.
Yes, Dan Duell is now an ally.
Yeah,
an advocate.
Exactly.
I go to events and he'll be telling people about this.
Yeah, and
about you and what he's learned.
But so that goes back to Stephanie, because she said, because he was talking with her, and she said, "Oh well, you ought to talk to Ginger Lane," which is cool.
Yes, it's like a neural network.
Yeah, that's all right. One of the great opportunities that I did take advantage of was in Counterbalance, because we did an annual showcase of physically integrated dance. That was my idea. So I did initiate that. That I produced and directed, and of course not included, but Stephanie and I were co-artistic directors for all those years. I reached out to inviting guest artists. So I had Alice Shepard. I had invited Lisa Bufano, a wonderful interdisciplinary artist. I invited Wobbly Dance from Washington? Washington.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Washington State. I then invited
Dancing Wheels.
Hi Cohen and Tali Wertheim from Israel. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. And the reason that I knew about them in Israel, from Jerusalem, the reason I knew about them was because I was going to Yad Vashem to commemorate and install a plaque for the people who actually enabled my 6 brothers and sisters and me to survive during the Holocaust. They hid us on a farm outside of Berlin for 2 years. And so we wanted to honor them and have their names inscribed on the wall of the Garden of the Righteous. So non-Jewish people who worked on behalf of saving Jews. And so when I anyway, this was set up to go to Israel, to Jerusalem, and the director of Yad Vashem, the museum in Jerusalem, she and I were talking. I don't know how it happened, but I mentioned dance, and she said, well, you should meet Hai Cohen and Tali Wertheim. They have this wonderful company just outside of Jerusalem. And I did a workshop for them and met them, and I invited them to come and perform at Counterbalance. So those were wonderful opportunities of bringing in guest artists.
And opportunities for us to really grow and hone our craft, which you're kind of inventing as you go, because disability aesthetics haven't been around for very long, and the idea of it, I should say, as a dance form. And I remember their workshop had a big impact on me. But many of those guest artists did.
It did. But I know I neglected to mention Laurel Lawson, who dances with Alice Shepard. And then most recently, Douglas Scott of Radius Dance from Atlanta came up and did a workshop that I participated in as a student, not as a leader or teacher. But that, which was great, but Laurel is a wonderful dancer and educator in her own right. And then we had a whole series of dance festivals in Chicago, and I think it was either 2015 or 16, Judith Smith, the former founder and director of Axis Dance Company, called me, and she said that she had gotten a grant and she was doing a convening of the state of disability dance, and that was happening in New York, and then she wanted to do all these different regional convenings, would Access Living be interested in hosting a regional convening in Chicago? And I said, absolutely. So
I remember that.
Yeah, so we did that, and that was great. So, you know, these opportunities just keep coming up and multiplying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else?
We can talk about Hannah.
Michael, anything that we didn't...
Question for you. You were talking about...
Speak up a little bit, please.
You were talking about disability dance and advocacy and the political side and, of course, the physical side. You shared with me about the Rosies.
Mm-hmm.
I would love you to describe that piece and how it furthered your sense of a political action within art.
Great question.
That is a good. Now I feel kind of bad.
Oh, this has been a wonderful interview.
What did you just say?
I said, that's a really good question. I feel kind of bad.
Oh, yeah, you should feel
I
terrible.
know, and I was in the Rosies. Like, I should have thought of that.
I want you to feel
She's a tough mentor. I got tough.
really, really bad.
Well, Hannah wasn't it.
The Rosies is a piece that I was so disappointed. Before the Rosies, I actually choreographed a very short solo after the Pulse nightclub incident. I felt I was just destroyed by that. I became ill, so never got to perform it. But I had choreographed it. So that, and then shortly thereafter, the United States Supreme Court overturned a 50-year statute of Roe v. Wade, affording women the right to an abortion. And I've never really been a politically engaged person. I was so angry about it that I said, what can I do? And I came up with the idea of creating a dance work. And I called it, so this was a refutation of what the Supreme Court had done. And I called it the Rosies in honor of Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter is the iconic image of the women who worked in factories during World War II, while the men were in Europe and the Pacific in the war. So that was their contribution, which was a phenomenal contribution. Unfortunately, when the men came back after the war, the women had to go back to being their typical housewives. But some of them had fought for these rights and pursued them. And the motto that they used was, we can do it, and you can do it, and I can do it. And I used that. It was a very iconic image of a woman in factory work clothes with a bandana on her head to protect her hair from getting caught in factory machinery, and a raised fist crossed like that. And representing both ability and defiance. And so I created this piece that you, LaDonna, were instrumental in, along with 3 other women. And it was, we performed it a number of times, but memorably, we performed twice in one night when I was awarded the Distinguished Service Award for See Chicago Dance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was cool. And I did that because it continued my work in advocacy and standing up. It was kind of like sticking a finger in the eye of the Supreme Court, dominated by these men who think they know all about women,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very political statement. I'm very proud of it. And so it was definitely not in the tradition of my lyrical flowing style. It was strong. It wasn't angry, it was just powerful and dynamic. And that's what and in fact, I interviewed each of the 4 dancers at some point, either during or after creating the piece. And I said, what's the one word that comes to you when you think about this? And each person, unbelievably, said exactly the same word: empowerment. And that's the message that I wanted to convey, but I didn't put that word in anybody's mouth. They came and spontaneously said it. So that, I guess, continues the arc of advocacy, and it's also, when you think about it in my personal life, Hitler and fascism and his ilk have tried to destroy primarily Jews in the world so that they could have their 1,000-year right. And they did not succeed. They miserably did not succeed. And this was perhaps a part of my sticking a finger in their eye and saying, we're still here. You're long gone, but we are still here. And fascism will have no place in this world. It's perhaps a subtle way of fighting oppression, fighting discrimination, and being a strong advocate. But it's my way. And so every way has value, and I think needs not to be dismissed, but to be acknowledged for the worth that it has. Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
So good.
Gosh, some of the questions I wrote down early on, you answered them all, so.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Oh, we could go on another 10 hours.
Okay.
Anybody need a break? Water, something? Nothing?
I would say one more question. Given all that you've said about the advancements, not only in your advocacy work, but in your dance work, what would you wish for disability dance in the city of Chicago to have, to be afforded that it doesn't currently have?
Oops, excuse me. I would like disability dance to be part of the summer Pritzker Pavilion dance that has never been acknowledged.
We did that one year. We did that one year.
as an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's never been. It still has not come. I want more opportunities for. I want more opportunities for being able to take class.
Yeah.
There are not many opportunities for dancers with disabilities to study, to learn, to have teachers and mentors that they can look to. That's a big desire of mine. Daniel Duell at Ballet Chicago is one of the few people who has embraced that idea. Now, Stephanie Clemens at MOMENTA has always had students with disabilities as part of her dance classes. Since what, 1980 or 83 when she first came to Chicago? But that's rare, and she was out in Oak Park until she retired. So I want those, besides the performing and choreographic opportunities, which would be wonderful, but you know what? I won't say I'm tired of fighting to get a foot in the door. But because I think disability dance on its own is great the way it is. But more opportunities, and they are coming along slowly, more opportunities to perhaps stand alongside companies, either for engagement, for, I hate to say it, money. Money drives everything, right? And the inclusion of dancers, or I will say artists with disabilities, should not be taken for granted. We have a value, and we need to be given the respect that we deserve. But initially, it might start with getting the chance to take dance class and study with people. And that may mean bringing in people like Alice Shepard to guest teach for a few weeks, or Laurel, or all the different dancers who are out there, which is great. Actually, that Douglas Scott came and did a workshop for 5 days that was put together by Unfolding Disabilities Future and Synapse Arts, which was great. Now, Douglas does not have a disability himself, but he has run this company for many years, and it's a good, viable company. So those are some of the things that I'm kind of after. And having the opportunity to be part of Chicago Dance History Project is a huge, I think, inclusive step forward. So not as an afterthought, but as part of the Chicago dance community. That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. And a number of years ago, a few years ago, Barbara Atkins Ruman said to me, "Haven't you, been interviewed?" And I said, "No." And I didn't call the project and say, you guys should really interview me. But somebody I know, I don't know who it is, but name starts with an L, ends with an F. Oh, I guess I should say the name then, especially since the last name starts with an F. LaDonna Friedheim, Javed, along with Michael McStraw, just decided, or not decided, but worked hard to bring this interview off, and that's. So kudos to both of you. And to Sean! Wake up, Sean! For filming this whole thing, filming and recording. Thank you so much. This was great.
I have a question.
Wish I had cookies to offer you. I might have pecan sandies.
I don't think we've ever, I don't remember us talking about this. Classes. So, well, we talk about it all the time, but do you think, when you say more classes, are you thinking of specific for people with disabilities and or just being permitted to take a regular class?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely being permitted to take a regular class, but classes that specifically focus on, if you use wheelchairs, focus on wheelchair technique.
Oh,
And
yes.
I don't mean adapting the wheelchair to a ballet class. There's a big difference between what I consider adaptive dance. And by the way, there has to be a recognition that disability dance is not therapy. Right? It's an art form. It is a stand-alone art form. But there are specifics to wheelchairs that if you have an acquired disability, as I do, and you start using a manual wheelchair, there are techniques of learning how to turn corners, of learning how to propel the chair backwards if you're using a manual chair, of learning what your body position needs to be to propel yourself forward, and to do things like wheelies, which means tipping back on your back, on your two wheels, being able to spin quickly or slowly, however you wish. There are some specific techniques that can be individualized, but opportunities for that, and that doesn't fit into a standard dance class. So again, as I said earlier, it's not doing batmatandus with your hand. Sorry, that doesn't wash for me personally. But creating images, working with the body that you have to further your artistry. And you learn from each other. So getting together is I think really important. As a matter of fact, there's a dancer with MOMENTA. His name is Robbie Williams. What? Being deaf as I am, I have no idea what that sound is. I just hear a sound. Robbie Williams came to a Disability Arts Festival workshop that we had out at the mayor's office for people with disabilities on Ogden a few years ago. And being one of that was put together primarily by Deb Goodman, a former Graham dancer and dancer with MOMENTA, who really loved this idea. And I was part of that. LaDonna was part of it. Don't know why I'm suddenly getting your names. Anyway, LaDonna was instrumental in that. And during lunch break, I was going into the lunch area, and I saw this guy sitting at a table, and I said, "Ooh, a guy." Grab the guy. And I went over and introduced myself, and I said, "Hi, my name is Ginger. Who are you? Where are you? Why are you here? And come join us." And Robbie came with a couple of other friends of his and dance colleagues. Robbie was a tango dancer who had acquired a disability. And I think this may have been his first foray. And so he came into the other room and he joined us. And he is now president of the board of MOMENTA. Is that right? He's president? And he kind of used Chris Lenzo as his mentor, because Chris is also a manual wheelchair user who's a guy, and guys have a different, strength and body ability, and which was great. So I think Chris taught him a lot, and Robbie has become a wonderful dancer and choreographer in his own right. But that's joining the community. He did it because he came, and I said, just follow along. There's no right and there's no wrong. You'll just learn. And that was great. So the opportunities of getting together, having workshops.
I know, some car
Who is it?
mad.
Oh, well,
Or is it a boat? You think it's
Could be.
it's a car boat.
yeah, right. So that's some. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that for a while. And Robbie dances with LaDonna all the time, and has gotten LaDonna into tango.
I'm a tango dancer now.
Now, one of the things that LaDonna, that you do, to do that with your hands. Okay, so that move right there is actually a Spanish
Flamenco.
move. It's flamenco. I can no longer do it, but I used to. And what it is creating a flower and picking a flower, putting it kind of behind your back, and it's it's hard for me to do. I actually choreographed a piece called Paloma Triste, and it was a solo, and it was all about my hands, which was kind of cool. Even the hands that don't work the way they used to work, they have their own intrinsic value, which is nice. Yeah.
I took a flamenco class.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. We're gonna create a piece.
Years ago, speaking of a flamenco class, one of my dance colleagues, where I taught ballet, she also had been at Edna McRae studio, and but she loved flamenco, and she'd gone to Spain for many years to study. Anyway, she was doing a performance at the Chicago Library, the Harold Washington Library, And she said, I want you to be part of it. So I said, oh, cool. And we found a guy who was my partner, and we did a Kenney, which is a wonderful flamenco duet. And was a non-disabled dancer, and I'm in the chair, in my manual chair, and we did a lot of flamenco. It was so much fun. And,
Very cool.
huh?
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was. I came out with my fan and my hair. It was a lot of fun. Cool stuff.
Do you have anything more? This has been exceptional. It really has been exceptional.
It's because LaDonna and I are such exceptional people.
I
Oh,
know,
yeah.
modest too.
Now, the person I did not mention, who was, oh God, things just keep coming up. Esther Grimm.
Oh, yes.
Esther Grimm, of course, ran the Three Arts. Esther didn't know it, but Three Arts and I go all the way back to Edna McRae in the 1950s, because Three Arts was a women's residential facility for artists from out of state, young artists who wanted to come to Chicago and study and needed a place to live. So we had all these dancers from out of state who studied at Edna McRae, and they lived at the Three Arts building, which was fun. Anyway, the Three Arts Foundation that Esther was executive director of for many years gives out an award each year to women artists, artists of color, and artists with disabilities, which is one of the first and only, what do you say, recognition for artists with disabilities and women artists in Chicago. And I'm very honored and proud to say that I was a recipient. I think it's existed since 2010, somewhere around there. And out of that, then, Esther said, well, so I got a phone call. And things keep happening with phone calls. I got a phone call from Mark Kelly. Said, we'd like you to be part of the Chicago Advisory Council for the Arts. And so I did that for several years. And I'm sure it's because he had talked with Esther Grimm, who said, and Esther was on that council as well. So I did that for a number of years, which was great. Mm-hmm. So furthering the art world in Chicago, that because I was the only person on that council who had a pretty, not profound, but pretty substantial hearing loss, they made their meetings accessible to me, which was great. Mm. I'm trying to think who was on that council at that time. Oh God. Deeply Rooted. Who ran Deeply Rooted?
Aiega?
Yeah, he was on that. Mm-hmm. So he and I started chatting, and
yeah,
Jeff.
Winning See Chicago Dance this.
What?
Yeah. We announced that. Yes, we.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
See Chicago Dance, the Legacy Award.
It's going to Kenney and Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the dance community sort of winds up somehow connecting with with everybody in it.
Yeah.
With them, whether it was Randy Newsom or Randy Duncan, just different people that you get to know. And as I said, years ago I studied with Gus, and then Nan, of course, has ran the company for so many years. Wonderful dancers, and one of my perhaps idols for Chicago dance is Hubbard Street. I used to go out to Woodstock
The Opera House?
in the middle of winter in horrible snow, an hour and a half to get there to watch to see them perform. Fabulous company. I particularly loved them in the early days when they just did a lot of their fun stuff, and they always ended every performance with the 40s. Just such a
Good piece.
fun.
Yeah.
Their signature piece. They and Conti choreographed this piece. I think it was called Rodin, for him and Claire Bataille, because they'd been in France. And stunning. Didn't do it very long, but a stunning piece. Claire, unfortunately. Life goes on, right?
It does. Tell us, how did you come to study with Edna McRae?
Edna McRae, my great teacher and mentor in dance. I was probably 8 years old. I had not been in this country very long. Maybe I was 8 or 9, I don't remember. Anyway, I was taking a dance class because my mother, who was a visual artist and a singer, decided, children had to have introduction to all the arts, put me in a dance class. Well, she didn't know that when I emigrated to the United States from Germany, I actually danced on the captain's table along with my 6 siblings, and I came over as orphans. And anyway, I was the youngest of 7, so there I was, this little kid performing on the captain's table, which was great and fun. But so I was in this dance class we lived on the South Side, and just a local. And from there, my mother and father decided I should go to Interlochen, the Interlochen Arts Academy, which at that time was called National Music Camp. It was just a summer camp. It was an 8-week camp. So I attended, and I studied piano. Now, this is as a 10-year-old child. Studied piano and dance. And my dance teacher was the first director of dance at Interlochen. Her name was Hildegard Lewis, and she had been a friend of Joseph Maddie, the founder of Interlochen National Music Camp in Interlochen, Michigan. And Hildegard Lewis gave me private lessons. And my mother and father came up for, I don't know, the 4th weekend or 8th weekend, whatever it was, and said to my mother, "You're from Chicago. There's only one place for Ginger to study. You take her to Edna McRae dance studio downtown. You take her there every week. That's the place to go. That's the only teacher you should go to, that she should go to, because she has a lot of talent I love to think I have talent, but if she's serious about dance, you take her there. So that's how I got to Edna McRae, and who was just really the grande dame of dance, and taught many master. She was a master teacher, and a wonderful choreographer. There's a thing that dancers have intuitively, which is muscle memory. I learned some of these dances for the early 1950s. I can lie in bed and I can create that dance in my head. I can't do it anymore. But all of those dances that I learned at that time, the muscle, the memory is there. It's muscle memory. The body knows what to do. And that all came from Edna McRae. So I really credit her for, and a little bit to Interlochen, because Interlochen saw potential in me. And I loved performing there and did so every year. And that's how it's, what is it? I'm not thinking of symbiosis. I'm thinking of, I don't know, things coming together. So the combination of Hildegard, how did Hildegard Lewis know about Edna McRae? I don't know, but she certainly did. And maybe it was because Miss McRae had taught, master classes. And I wound up, when I was older, working for Miss McRae in the office for a couple of summers when she would go on vacation. And it was fun. I was happy to do it. And that's how I met Bob Joffrey, that's how I met Anton Dolan, all through Edna McRae. What a great opportunity. Well, we all have those opportunities. I'm not the only one. I mean, look what your involvement with Interlochen. That was only one summer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you love it?
I
Or
loved
was
it.
it just okay?
No, I loved it.
One thing Edna McRae spoiled for me was that nobody could compare to her as a teacher. So when I went to Interlochen, as I got a little bit older, I was a bit critical. I loved taking modern class with Joe Gifford, who was of the Humphrey Weidman technique from New York, another wonderful dancer and performer. And so I loved modern. I wasn't as, even though I was one of the lead dancers in ballet at Interlochen, I was a bit snobbish, as in very snobbish, and critical of the teaching technique. I didn't think it was quite up to Miss McRae's standards. I know, it's terrible. But she spoiled me because she was so, as I mentioned early on in the interview, highly disciplined and a perfectionist. And if she didn't like, if you were messing around in class or not paying attention, she would kind of tap you with her cane. Oh yes, she was that kind of, no nonsense. And yet she had a lot of fun, but and that's why I have, when I have been involved with things, I've been critical, not necessarily verbally to others, but definitely critical of when I see something that I don't think has a professional quality in either the teaching or just in the rehearsal room. If you're there to work, then work. And you know, have some good standards and still enjoy it, because it's the doing that is the enjoyment, the doing and the perfecting of the doing.
Do you see a similarity between Edna McRae and Homer Bryant?
And
Homer, Mr. Homer.
oh yes,
Because Homer's motto is, the fun is in the discipline and the discipline is in the fun. And the way you just described Edna McRae seems very similar to me.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Very, very much so, because I guest taught last night for a disability class, and I said, yeah, I'm going to be hard on you. I'm going to call you out, and these are students with disabilities. But I said, well, you know, when I say get your knees straight, I want those knees straight, or whatever it is, and they worked hard. And I said, this is not a modern class. This is a ballet class, and it has a different aesthetic than a modern class or a jazz class or interpretive dance, if that's what you're into. This has a different kind of aesthetic and a different kind of discipline. And I said, and the enjoyment comes in the doing, and comes in the working to do the best you can, whatever the best is for you. You may not have, I'm not asking for perfection, I'm just asking for effort. So the perfection is in the effort, right? And earlier on, I was talking with you, LaDonna, about the disability aesthetic and there's a difference between, which, and I've been reading about it lately, there's a difference between a classical beauty and ideal of harmony, symmetry, line, okay? And what is the ballet line? Ballet line is extending, keeping shoulders down, extending, and then the upturned foot at the end of that leg with a very straight knee, okay? That's one standard. And we call that beauty. But there's another standard of beauty, particularly for disability. And that has been described by the disability scholar Ali Bresnahan and Michael Deckard, who write about there's a beauty in experience. It's a lovely description that really allows, you know, ballet can almost seem cookie cutter because you can replace one dancer with another as long as they have similar body shapes. Disability doesn't do that. Everybody's so very different. LaDonna and I are so very different. Would you mind changing your name to something like Virginia or something? LaDonna and I couldn't possibly do the same thing, but there's a beauty in what each of us can do. And that's a beauty in experience that you can, I call it, there's a perfection in the imperfection. It's just a word salad kind of thing. But they described it, and they've written a wonderful paper about it, and they describe it as beauty in the experience. It has a lot of value, so. Who worked with Joe Gifford? Chet Walensky. Chet Walensky was from Illinois and was a wonderful dancer and taught downstate, okay, and at Carbondale. Munt Brooks. Munt Brooks actually were from New York and either Utah or Denver or somewhere. And Maxine Munt and Alfred Brooks. And they were my very first modern dance teachers.
And that's M-U-N-T?
M-U-N-T. Maxine Munt and Alfred Brooks. Then there was, and my ballet teacher at Interlochen, after Hildegard Lewis, because Hildegard Lewis was retiring back in 1950 or maybe 51, was Frances Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, from Kansas, along with Hildegard. And then, starting in about 1953 or 54, my teacher was Sheila Riley from Milwaukee. And Sheila was a lovely dancer who just, what shall I say, adored me. I'm joking. But she and her brother Bill Riley came up for one summer and did a wonderful solo from Graduation Ball that we loved. And of course, after Maxine Munt and Alfred Brooks, I had Joe Gifford for several summers, and I'm trying to think of his. There was both a director of dance and then his associates, and I can't think of their names. And then Bill Hugg, also at Interlochen. So a raft of names, and one trying to think. About 1957, and music theater up in Highland Park. It was like summer stock. Trying to think of, I cannot think of who the director was at the moment, but, and I had been auditioned for the Muni Opera in St. Louis, and I got it, and my parents wouldn't let me go because it was my senior year of high school, and I would have had to miss graduation. And they said, sorry, you're not missing graduation. So I didn't have the opportunity to do the Muni Opera, which was a wonderful, really a highly, highly professional music theater in St. Louis for many years. So those are a few of the names that come to mind. So if you include those names in your interview, they may come up. Good Lord. I mentioned Diane Consor. Marilyn Oden was a beautiful McRae dancer. Barbara Stein, who is still here in Chicago, and it's always. Betsy Herskin was a wonderful ballet teacher in Chicago. And I'd mentioned Orrin and Neil Cahan earlier, but of course Patty's husband, or Patty's partner, Ken Johnson, and Ralph Robinson, who performed with Miss McRae and then moved out to Washington State and had his own dance studio along with his wife for I think many years, which was great. And here's a name nobody will remember, I don't think. Maybe you will. Jules Walton and Betty Davray. Betty Davray was, you know, a contemporary, of course, of Edna McRae, but also Stone Cameron. Yeah, and Ruth Page. So the interconnectedness of dance that came through and filtered through, oh, wonderful dance work that I did with John Kriza and Ruth Ann Cohen, Ruth Ann Koesun of ballet theater, was just such, those are great experiences. And then studying with Eric Braun up in Highland Park, who said to me, I need to put you back on point. I said, what? At my age? You know, I'm over 30. What are you talking about? He said, oh, you can go back on your point shoes. So I did, of course. And an early protege of Edna McRae for a short while was Keith Allison. Keith Allison. Does that name ring a bell? No. He ran the studio for a short time after Edna. Yeah. So there's just a wealth of history that. And speaking of that, one of the most famous that came out of Chicago, of course, was Carol Lawrence. If you don't know who Carol Lawrence was or is, go back to your history. Think of West Side Story. Did I tell you about the time I met Leonard Bernstein?
No. Do tell. Tell us about the
Do
time you
tell.
met Lenny.
Oh, you want to know about my encounter with Leonard Bernstein? There I am sitting at Ravinia, on about the 6th row center, and he's conducting, and I said, oh, Leonard Bernstein, oh my God, my ideal. And he's conducting Tchaikovsky, and I'm sitting there, and at the end of the piece, I'm about to get up, but it's really not time to get up because it was only the end of the movement of the Tchaikovsky piece of the 6th Symphony. And he turned around and he looked at me. I don't know why, but I was in the 6th row, so he saw me. Fast forward a couple of years, and a very dear, dear friend of mine, who was the director at the director of the of the Musical Society at Ann Arbor of the University of Michigan, was coming to Chicago and knew Leonard, of course, and said, called me up, Ginger, do you want to go to the concert? I said, I'm there. Okay. So we went, and afterwards he said, do you want to say hello to Leonard Bernstein? I said, oh, absolutely. We went downstairs to the basement in this long line, and Leonard had a habit, I call him Leonard as though he's my best friend. Leonard had a habit of shaking everybody's hand who's in line. And I'm there, and I've got my dear friend Ken Fisher, standing behind me because he's going to introduce me to Leonard Bernstein. And Leonard comes along the line, and he sees me, and he said, Ravinia, 6th row center. Can you believe it? We then went back to his dressing room, and we had a lovely visit. To meet Leonard Bernstein.
Did he reveal to you why he remembered you?
Yeah, he said he saw me sitting in the 6th row. I think it was the red hair.
Oh.
At that time, I did have flaming red hair, which has faded slightly. as in a lot. I don't know. You know, Leonard had a thing for young women, and he also had a thing for guys.
Yeah.
So he just happened to see me, and maybe, I don't know. I really don't know, except that it floored Ken, my friend, who thought he was pulling a real surprise by my getting to meet Leonard Bernstein, who said, he didn't know my name, but he knew who I
Your seat
was.
number.
I thought that was fun.